$1,000, so a little bit more than Stormy Daniels got, to suppress her story of having an affair with Donald Trump while he was married to his current wife, Melania.
I just want to remind the audience, and for those who were with us every day, you remember this, but you have reported in recent days how David Pecker was back before the grand jury.
He was among the first witnesses, and he was the final witness.
But we still have to get, I think, an answer from Alvin Bragg at the press conference as to why now. We still don't have that answer. This is, this is interesting and it's fascinating, and this is sort of along the lines of what we expected. But there's not a lot new here. I mean, we knew about these various allegations. We knew about the various payoffs. I think that Alvin Bragg still owes the public an explanation as to why did he decide to begin this grand jury at this point, well over a year into his term. Why did the previous DA, who had opened the case after Michael Cohen pled guilty? And there are a lot of people who've been focusing on a comment that Cyrus Vance made on television where he said that he had been asked to stand down by the feds. But this is now after that. He opened it and decided not to charge. These are questions that I think that the DA has to answer at this press conference that is not answered from the press release and is not answered from the indictment.
Some of the details we have reported out, some are new, as John Carl points out, and we were aware of catch and kill. We had reported on that over the course of many years here, but the fact that he's pointing to it directly as a scheme that led to this and that helped build this indictment today. I want to bring in Terry Moran because, Terry, the big question going into today was how would a state prosecutor connect the falsification of banking records, if you will, to something that would impact an election? How do you draw the link? And it would appear it's this scheme being described in the indictment.
Right, which describes hush money payments to several people, not just one, that this was a pattern and practice during the 2016 election. And it turns out, as Aaron Katersky heard from his sources, there is a section of New York State's election law, Section 17-152, which says any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Now, that could be connected. That's a New York State crime. But if it is a conspiracy to use unlawful means, falsifying business records would be that. Although Aaron is also hearing that they are involving federal campaign law. And then that gets into the question, why is a state prosecutor empowered to enforce federal campaign law? Federal government isn't going to like state prosecutors running around making cases on that. There's preemption issues, as they call it. There's other issues as well. And so there may be a lot of legal fighting about the nature of these charges before you get to any witness and evidence and trial.
And the state prosecutor making the case that this somehow affected a direct correlation with federal election law is the part of this, Terry, that's really untested.
Very untested. It is a reach. This prosecution is a reach. Obviously, they've got them dead to rights on falsifying documents, falsifying business documents, but then to latch it into the crime of either the New York State election law or federal election law is a leap, and it needs to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 people, and that may be tough.
Pierre?
Yeah, one of the things that's quite interesting here is that the statement of facts, which we now have and have printed out, is what speaks for the indictment. It lays out the narrative. But the key witness in this case, based on the reading of this, will be the publisher of the National Enquirer, because he can speak to, one would think, whether Donald Trump himself was aware of this catch and kill scheme and participated in it. One of the things that Michael Cohen stated when he was pleading guilty to the federal charges is that it was done at the direction of individual A, who we now know is former President Donald Trump. Now, whether they have the evidence to prove that Donald Trump was a willing participant in this, directed it, is what we have yet to see. What is the evidence that they can show that he was directly involved, knew what was going on, and wanted it to happen?
I think it's really interesting, Pierre, because people at home are going to say, well, we've heard so much about Stormy Daniels, we've heard so much about Michael Cohen, but Pierre Thomas just said the key witness in this case will be David Pecker. and the alleged involvement or interaction that involved a catch-and-kill scheme.
Exactly. Because, again, he's the person that's orchestrating it. He's catching the story and killing it so that it never sees the light of day. So the key is, what was his conversation with Donald Trump, if any? What was his conversation with Michael Cohen? What was his understanding of what was to take place?
And what did he tell the DA?
Exactly.
Behind closed doors. All right, let's bring in John Santucci for more on the scheme that they're laying forward here, John, the alleged scheme.
David, the most fascinating thing to me in reading this statement of facts is that, everybody and us thought Michael Cohen was the sole narrator of this story. Reading this statement of facts, this seems like it's a story told by Michael Cohen and David Pecker. They talked through, David, in this statement of facts, how this was not a one-time occurrence in this relationship. That David Pecker, who was the publisher of the National Enquirer, when they would get wind of a story that was bad for Donald Trump, they would reach out to Michael Cohen and, as we've said, make a deal to catch the story and then make it go away, to kill it. They give the examples of the first woman that was a $150,000 payment, that being Karen McDougal, who gave an interview right around the 2016, right after the 2016 election, and talked about what a relationship she had with Donald Trump. Far more significant, frankly, in her telling of it than Stormy Daniels. They talk about a doorman who wanted to sell a damaging story against Trump, another catch and kill there, and they talk about Stormy Daniels. But that one seems to be a little different, but nevertheless, Pecker and Cohen working in tandem on all of these. It's a really interesting story, quite frankly, that the DA's office tries to show. And, we've thrown that word conspiracy out there a lot. Certainly in the statement of facts, they are talking about a conspiracy in the sense that this was a trend. This was not a one-time deal that happened. It seemed to be a rinse and repeat relationship for Cohen and Pecker, all to the benefit of Donald Trump.
John Santucci, our thanks to you. Keep pouring through along with the rest of the team here. I want to bring in former Governor Chris Christie. And Chris, I'm curious, are you at all surprised at the role David Pecker seems to be playing as far as his seems to be a very significant witness here for the DA?
No, in fact, on Sunday when I was on the This Week show with George, he asked me what did I think was going to be different or new. And I looked at him and said two words, David Pecker. Look, I disagree a bit with some who have said they think this is a reach. Look, if in fact it doesn't seem to me that federal campaign finance law needs to be involved in any way here. The crime is to try to essentially defraud the voters of the state of New York by trying to either help or impede the election or defeat of two or more candidates, which would be Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And Pecker is the guy. And I think what may have changed here with Alvin Bragg is maybe David Pecker was willing to come forward now and be cooperative because in the federal case, there was a lot of back and forth with Pecker about what he would do or not do. And Pecker, presumably, operative, because in the federal case, there was a lot of back and forth with Pecker about what he would do or not do. And Pecker, presumably, does not have the same infirmities that Michael Cohen would have as a witness. One, you haven't seen David Pecker anywhere. You haven't seen him on television giving any interviews or doing anything else. I haven't seen this guy for a long time. And I certainly haven't seen him making any public comments as opposed to Michael Cohen, who seems to be as addicted as his former boss is to getting in front of a TV camera. So my guess as to what's going on here is that the single most important witness, as was said earlier by Pierre, you don't have to prove these 34 falsification counts. They're not going to be difficult to prove. And Cohen will probably have the most to do with that. And I don't think it'll be hard to prove. The key is going to be proving the underlying crime that elevates it to a felony. And I think there is going to be one most important witness, and that's going to be David Pecker.
We have pulled the transcript. We'll give you complete credit for having predicted some of this on Sunday morning. Our thanks to you, Governor Christie. Thank you very much. And so you heard Chris Christie there, former prosecutor himself, Dan and Kate, talking about it. There's been this discussion about the violation of campaign finance law, or that he's saying that perhaps that discussion we need to really be focusing on David Pecker here and a scheme. And he says, and that's what the DA is now trying to lay out.
So I think that there are two separate issues here, right? One is the technicalities of the law, and the other is prosecutorial discretion. The technicalities of the law are exactly what Chris Christie was talking about there, which is, does this fit into the category of a violation of the law? Can you prove it? Can you prove that Donald Trump knew about it? And then with regard to the rising it to a felony, that's where Pecker becomes really important, because he will come forward, presumably, and testify. And it says here, actually, in the statement of facts, section 23 says, the defendant thanked the AMI CEO for handling the stories of the doorman and woman one and invited the AMI CEO to the inauguration. In the summer of 2017, the defendant invited the AMI CEO to the White House for a dinner to thank him for his help during the campaign. Where do you think they're getting that from? They're getting it from David Pecker.
From David Pecker.
Is telling them that.
We're going to hear from the DA in a moment, but right now, all eyes on Donald Trump walking up the stairwell to his plane. He will fly back to Mar-a-Lago. He's expected to address reporters in Mar-a-Lago tonight with some sort of a statement, though unclear how much of that will change now, given what's played out here before us. It'd be fascinating, of course, obviously, to be on that plane for this 2 to 3 hour flight back down to Mar-a-Lago, John. But the president will no doubt be watching coverage and reacting to the indictment that he only saw moments before he entered that courtroom.
No doubt about it. And there's another line of narrative in this statement of facts, and it regards the pressure that Donald Trump was putting on Michael Cohen not to tell the truth. And it describes two of Donald Trump's lawyers in communication with Michael Cohen and promising to be a back channel with the president. And some of this stuff is really quite interesting. First of all, they point out that Donald Trump had actually tweeted after Michael Cohen's apartment was searched. Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. I don't see Michael Cohen doing that. But then it describes Cohen being approached by lawyer C is the way it's defined, which is defined as one of the defendant's lawyers, as offering a back channel of communication with the defendant, with Donald Trump, and saying this could not be a better situation for the president or for you. I spoke with another Trump lawyer, very, very positive. You are loved. Sleep well tonight. You have friends in high places. What this sounds to me like is the suggestion that Michael Cohen was going to be protected by Donald Trump. And what I actually asked Trump about the day after his Michael Cohen's home was raided was, are you considering a pardon for Michael Cohen? And I'll never forget the reaction, because Trump glared at me, looked at me and said, that's a stupid question. Stupid question. And it really got to him. This implication here, it seems to me, is that through these intermediaries, Michael Cohen was being assured that the president was going to take care of him as long as he didn't testify against him. How do you take care of him? It's a pardon.
The question that you asked. You know, I do think there's another question out there, too, and that is whether or not the previous Manhattan DA had the cooperation, the full cooperation of David Pecker, the way Alvin Bragg seems to. He seems to be a crucial part of this indictment, and I think that's going to be a central question for...
But he's not unassailable either. Remember, he ran a really seedy publication for a long time that did a lot of dirty work, right? So let's not start treating David Pecker as if he's going to be some, witness that's going to be come in with totally clean hands, et cetera.
Well,
right?
I'm certainly not elevating him and putting him on a pedestal, but I'm asking, though, is because there have been questions about why the other DA didn't move forward and why Alvin Bragg did. I wonder if this will be part of the answer moving forward. It's just a question that's out there.
I think that's right. I think, and look, Chris Christie made that point, and it strikes me as being absolutely, potentially true. We don't know exactly what the difference is between what he was willing to do before and what he's willing to do now.
And just one little development also. In 2021, the National Enquirer's parent company paid an almost $200,000 Federal Election Commission fine specifically regarding the Karen McDougal payments. So I'm not sure how exactly the timing works out, but this is something the Federal Election Commission did look at, and there was an actual settlement reached. So other investigators to the kind of, well, why haven't the feds looked at this? Actually, as to one aspect of the scheme, the feds did take a look, and the FEC actually imposed a civil penalty.
And David, to pick up on what Dan was saying, this reference to President Trump having a conversation with Pecker about his gratefulness for catching and killing these stories. Again, we don't know the specifics. We don't yet know what Pecker would say in court. We don't know those details. But that's going to be critical, is how detailed is that information? You know, we don't know what his credibility will be, but there is this notion pointed to in this statement of facts that the president was aware of what was done. That's the suggestion, and was happy about it having been done. So we need to dig into that. Pecker will be a person that everyone wants to try to interview right now. We need to know the answer to those questions before we can make some final assessments.
And as we look at that live picture of the plane, he hasn't taken off yet, the former president, to go back to Mar-a-Lago. But John, I'd be fascinated to know how angry perhaps the former president is to have learned the level to which it appears David Pecker has cooperated with the DA and with prosecutors here.
Yeah, Donald Trump hasn't always been good to understate things at being loyal to those that have been loyal to him, but he has demanded loyalty. And here you have two people who are extremely close to him. His fixer, Michael Cohen, his good friend, David Pecker. And we know Michael Cohen turned on him, 5 years ago. But now we're learning that David Pecker, somebody he did consider a friend, has turned on him, and he will be seething in anger at that. Again, this is somebody that isn't always so good at conveying loyalty to others, but he demands it
in return. No question about that. And in fact, we're seeing that another new chapter of that in tracking the Republicans who are supporting him right now. Rachel Scott has reported that not only is he calling for support, but then keeping track of those who are with him and those who are not, particularly with him ahead in the polls and growing, at least right now, in these last couple of days. I want to bring in Olivia Rubin again, the reporter who was inside that courtroom, because this was something that we had all talked about here at the desk, which is the political calculation, because there's this race for the White House playing out right now. And Olivia, both sides got a chance to say when ideally this trial would begin if it goes to trial, and there were two different dates thrown out.
Absolutely. They in a way got right down to business, with the prosecutor telling the judge that they were eyeing a January 2024 trial date. Of course, that's right in the middle of that election year. Trump's attorney got up. Todd Blanche, he said that felt aggressive to him. They said maybe something more towards the spring, obviously trying to push it back a little bit there, with the judge ultimately weighing in. He did not pick a date or anything of the sort, but he said, I would like to move this ahead.
But the defense actually pushing it to the spring, or suggesting at least, which gets it even closer to Election Day.
Exactly, that's right. And again, the judge not weighing in on dates. Of course, he did set that date for December, just at the end of this year, for Trump to potentially have to come back to Manhattan, come back to court. The attorneys will be there. The question is, will Trump be there? But this does not seem like something that's going away, or something that Trump himself will not have to be dealing with.
Really interesting information coming in from Olivia Rubin. Again, this timetable is not set in stone, not even close, but there were some dates thrown out in court. The judge suggesting that both sides would have to return the end of this year, but that perhaps if this goes to trial, the prosecution suggesting January of 24, obviously the beginning of this coming year, less than a year away, January 24, right in the height of a presidential campaign. The defense team reacting, saying let's push that back a little bit to spring of 24, and we all know that in November of 24 is going to be election night in America. So this is something that will play out right in the middle of a presidential campaign. You're looking live right now at the podium where it's believed the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, who has a number of questions to answer. Dan Abrams has a number of them for him. And so do the reporters in that room about the theory behind this indictment, why now, why this indictment, and how strong he believes this scheme that he has laid out in this indictment. That one of the things that Pierre Thomas pointed out right away is that it's not just Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, the names that you've heard reported over and over again. Also central figures in this indictment, it would appear, and we'll let the Manhattan DA speak for himself, but it would appear David Pecker, who owned the National Enquirer, has played a significant role in this indictment put together by the DA and the allegation that there was this scheme, and we've reported on this before, to catch and kill stories that were considered to be harmful, if you will, to a presidential candidate, particularly some of these stories that were playing out in the months and leading up to that crucial election day of 2016, John.
Absolutely, and I have to come back to this motion about the trial date. January 16th is the New Hampshire primary. And the prosecution is asking for a start date in January for the trial. The Trump team responding with the spring. Well, the spring, we're talking Super Tuesday. We're talking the conclusion.